Welcome back on behalf of the Irish in Dubai and the Dubai Irish Diaspora here in the Middle East and the MENA region. I'd like to welcome you back to our second segment of Ireland's Future in Conversation With. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome our second guest, none other than one of the greatest, in my opinion, in recent years, political debatists who's had many conversations over the years about not only Northern Ireland's future, but the future of the island of Ireland. And I'd like to welcome none other than former leader of the SDLP, current MP for Foyle, Mr. Colum Eastwood.
Thanks, Billy. Good to be on with you and your viewers.
Colum, thank you very much for taking this. And as from one dairyman to another, it's a great pleasure to interview somebody from my own hometown as we continue this series for the Irish abroad.
I'm liking what you have in the background there. You're entering free dairy.
That's it.
Get not too far from home.
So, Colum, we normally start these wee conversations with a wee bit about a personal life and what you're doing now, what your plans are. So, I'll just get straight on in our first question is, as former leader of the SDLP, people would obviously assume that you have a lot more free time in your hands. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But what's your current priorities as a former leader of the SDLP, and how do you see your role as it is now as an MP evolving?
Well, I suppose it's just realised there, just a month ago today when I stepped down as leader after 9 years in charge, and in those 9 years we fought 10 elections. So I think that's kind of enough for anybody in that particular role. It's a lot of pressure. It's very enjoyable, but you spend an awful lot of time doing sort of internal party stuff, which I've never really made a great secret of, don't love. I'm more interested in doing the politics. So I've kind of now got, as Tony Benn said when he retired from Parliament in Westminster, he said more time for politics. And so I've obviously got a big job to represent the people of Derry, which is kind of my first job and first love. As you know, I'm very committed to doing that and to standing up for Derry and to making sure that we get our fair shake, which is not always simple. But I also, as leader, set up a thing called the New Ireland Commission, which we've now kind of spun out of the party, and it's going to be a standalone organisation, which is in one part think tank and another part campaigning organisation. So we're currently in a bit of a fundraising round at the minute to sort of resource that up, because I think there are a lot of people saying that we're having a conversation about the future, we're having a conversation about a new Ireland, but there's not an awful lot of work being done to prepare for it. And I don't want to be in a situation where a border poll is called someday and we haven't done the work. So we're already beginning, and we've been doing this for a couple of years. We've really ramped this up, a proper series of conversations which we've had largely with the unionist population, but we're also now doing significant research into what a United Ireland might look like, so that when the time comes and there's a referendum, we have a plan and we have a prospectus to show people that this is what we do differently. That'll also be a significant kind of campaigning organisation to try to win a referendum when the time comes. And I actually think coming out of the SDLP, we're more or less uniquely placed to bring in all the strands of Irish democratic opinion onto this pitch. So I don't think we can do this alone. I don't think Sinn Féin will do their bit, but I don't think they can do it alone. I think they will find it very difficult actually to convince that segment of the population who hasn't decided one way or another yet. Most of those people are voting for the Alliance Party. So we need a kind of broader based campaign organisation to get us there. And we're already bringing people with us. So we've already had Leo Varadkar, for example, was in Derry this month or last month at a New Ireland Commission event where he talked about the need for all the parties who are coming into this election now that's going to be held at the end of this month in the South, for them to properly commit to working towards a new United Ireland. And I've just written to them, all the leaders of the parties in the South, asking them to put that into their manifesto. We'll see what they do. But I think it's very important that the mainstream of Irish politics gets on this pitch. So Brexit changed everything. We know that's happened. You know, people are looking to the future. but it needs planned and needs managed, and the Irish government and the Irish body politic needs to be on that pitch. I think we can do a lot of that convening. I just think the connections that I have and the credibility I think that the SDLP has gives us a place in that conversation for the future that I think is very important.
It's funny enough that you said everybody's having a conversation when we are literally just having a conversation about it and hoping that, and you're right, you're hoping that the conversation leads to something. And, there's right now, there's very little to be documented. I know the Arctis has pushed forward and said they need to start planning, but I don't see a lot of that moving.
No, ideally, and I've been saying this for years, the Irish government were doing this work, and I'm trying to get them on that pitch. But in the meantime, somebody needs to do it, and other people are doing bits and pieces. I just think we have a particular role to play, not solely, not their own. Like Ireland's Future and other organisations will do stuff, other political parties will do stuff, but I think we've already got a proven kind of track record of bringing, like, this election's going to happen. The current government are probably going to be re-elected. I think that's I've had money to put on, that's where we'll be putting it. We need to be able to speak to them, and I think I can speak to them, and the New Ireland Commission can speak to them, and we're going to get on with it anyway, actually. And we're finding a lot of interest in places like America and London. It's important that all the different parts of the diaspora are involved in this. I mean, there's 12,500 people, as you were telling me before we came on, Billy, and where you are. And I think they need to be engaged in this conversation. And it's the kind of thing, this is important to me doing this conversation today, but it's the kind of thing that we will look to be out talking to people and visiting and trying to convince people. I think there's about 20%, 25% of the population in the north that don't know how to vote if there was a border poll tomorrow. And remember that decision around the border poll is going to be made in London, where I'm sitting right now, looking over the Thames. That's going to be made here in Parliament. So it's important that we're here having those conversations, and it's easier with the Labour government, obviously. But it's really important work, and it's the kind of work that we've been wanting to do forever. And the Good Friday Agreement gave us the opportunity to get on with democratically convincing people. So that 20% in Northern Ireland who are largely voting for the Alliance Party need convinced. A lot of people in the South need convinced as well. True. And in order to do that, we have to convince the leadership of those parties to not just say we want to see United Ireland, but to actually do the work, get it done. So I think that might keep me quite busy over the next few years. But I'm genuinely excited about it. Kind of freed from the burdens of leading a political party. I'm now got the time to focus on the politics and the important work. I mean, I'm not sure I would be in politics if I wasn't, an Irish nationalist, if I wasn't born in Derry. But it's a real kind of mission that we have that I think we can now I can now fully focus on without being distracted by anything else.
Well, I mean, you stepped into politics at a very, very young age. I believe it was 16, straight out of the college in Derry, was it? Is that right?
I was actually 14, turned 15 during the Good Friday Agreement campaign for the referendum, and I got involved in that campaign. And then one thing led to another, became heavily involved in the party, and it's one of those things, once it gets its claws into you, you can't really get them out. And then I ran for election to council. Wasn't supposed to be elected when I was 22, got elected, became mayor when I was 27, I think, the youngest ever. I don't say that to boast. It's like, I think it's going to be on my gravestone. It's one of those things that everyone said. The youngest ever mayor of Derry. And then went into the assembly after that and ended up as party leader at 33. And now people think I've retired at 41. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind. But I'm genuinely having done all that. I think I've made an awful lot of connections with people in powerful positions in Dublin, in London, and in Washington. And I think I'm going to use them now to try and get us to where we need to get to.
So considering doing all that you mentioned, from seriously where it really sort of took off, you obviously being involved with the Good Friday Agreement at such a young age. I'm sure Lisa McGee would be looking for an interview to talk about the Good Friday babies. But from 27 onwards, it seems as if you had a serious projectile into really hardcore back end rootsy politics and then becoming a political leader. And after achieving all that, like, is there any personal or political goals you still left to achieve?
Well, I mean, I'm genuinely not obsessed with position for myself. Some people say that, but like I'm not. If I was, I probably wouldn't have joined SDLP. But I'm more focused on what we can do. Like the things that made me go out and campaign for the Good Friday Agreement as a teenager were basically that I thought, well, one, that John Hume had delivered peace in Ireland, which took centuries to do. But most importantly for me, that then allowed us to achieve our aims politically and democratically and peacefully. And now we have a responsibility on us, this generation, when we can see the opportunity, and Brexit has largely created it out of a negative, but we can see the opportunity for change across the island. And I think we have a responsibility to get on with that. So that is, for me, the ambition now, is to help in some way or other deliver that. And it's not just because I want to see, the right old wrongs, or see the Irish flag flying over Storm, or any of that stuff. It's not about that. It's not this kind of old-fashioned view of nationalism. It's actually because places like Derry have been held back. The health service in the north is a disaster. It's basically collapsed. Our economy is nowhere near where it needs to be. We still have an immigration problem in the north. And then I look across the border, and their economy is absolutely flying. Many of the people who are now living in Dubai wouldn't have had to leave if we had the economy that we have right now.
Very true.
After 2008. So it's working down there, and I think our generation is entitled to a bit of that. We shouldn't just be told to be happy with peace, but an awful economy, peace, but crumbling public services. We should be saying what can be better, and I think the best answer to that is a new Ireland, where we don't cut off ties with Britain, but we have our own economy that we can run ourselves. We build those old connections that we can have with people, and the economies here and across the world will still exist, and they can be stronger, but we'll be back in the European Union. We'll be part of a thriving economy, a society that has chosen to be progressive in all sorts of ways. And I think that's exciting for a new generation. And I actually think it's an easy enough story to tell, and it'll be an easy enough campaign to run if we do the work in advance.
So you mentioned Brexit there, and I'll pick that up. And a lot of people in the south, and in fact maybe the north as well too, still can't really grasp it or get their heads around what it actually means. And especially in this conversation, it's great that we have the opportunity to sort of dumb that down, simplify it, or write the headline of what is Brexit or Irish Unity for Dummies. I wish we could write a book with that. But given that,
I'm going to write that book at the minute, actually.
you should. There's definitely a scope and a scale for it. And you mentioned Ireland's future there, and I had a conversation with Colum about dumbing down the political terminology and blurb to the common man and woman, so they could maybe understand it a wee bit better. So let's see. But given the change in the political landscape, particularly as you mentioned post-Brexit, what steps do you think we need to be taking to see Ireland's future thrive?
Well, look, Brexit was an English decision by English people, for English people. In fact, it was very negative for English people as well. Northern Ireland voted against it. Scotland voted against it. Bizarrely, Wales voted for it. Still can't get my head around that. It happened in England because in the 80s, Thatcher decided to close all the manufacturing, to destroy local communities, and not to replace it with anything. So there was no industrial strategy. So at the same time as globalization meant jobs went elsewhere, people also came in to Britain and England largely. And then lots of people in farmer mining towns and industrial towns saw their jobs going and their livelihoods going, and people coming in, and in large part they blamed those people for that, even though it was largely the Conservative Party that did it. And then for years, senior politicians blamed Europe for everything. So it was obvious that they were going to vote for that. It was clear to me. But what that did was ignore the fact that that there's a border in the middle of Ireland, and that this part of the United Kingdom, the Northern Ireland bit, couldn't have a physical border in Ireland again. So that just created this whole rupture. We've been able to protect ourselves in terms of trade and everything else, but nothing is ever going to be as good as being part of the European Union. And I think young people want to be part of the European Union again. So that means we have to, in the next phase of this conversation, convince people that there's a future that's part of the All-Ireland economy, which means part of the biggest economy in the world, which is the European Union of 500 million people. That's going to be the biggest selling point, I think, actually, in this conversation. But in terms of next steps, it's things like what I'm trying to do is build the case. So I want to be able to, in the next few years, hand you an understandable document that says, in a united Ireland, this is what everything's going to look like. This is what your pension's going to look like. This is what the health service is going to look like. This is what the education system's going to look like. This is how we're going to reconcile our communities. This is how the unionist British tradition is going to feel comfortable and part of this new Ireland, because we can't just ignore the fact there's a million people who don't want to do this. We have to bring them with us. I think it's all eminently doable. I just think the situation we're in at the minute isn't good enough. Economically, it's not good enough. You know, we still are dragged down by the old sectarian arguments that we need to get away from, and the status quo isn't working. So I think actually we can build a very positive case, and that's kind of what I'm going to be trying to do. And I think lots of others are doing it, but we need to do it in an organized, meaningful, funded way. You know, that's we're serious about it. So
for me and a lot of people, especially the diaspora abroad, we want to know what steps there is, and you know, we hear conversations about it. We were very lucky enough to have a conversation with Leo Varadkar at the end of last year when he was still Taoiseach. We're hoping that we can have a conversation with him here as well to address the Irish abroad. But I feel that the Irish abroad are still left in the dark, very, very much so. And it goes back to that old conversation, whether you're a Republican nationalist or for the Union or a loyalist. Does it go back into sectarian conversation? I want to remain part of the UK. I want to be part of the Republic of Ireland. I mean, those are the simplified terms that I believe that people are just clinging on to when there's obviously so much more to it. But what role does, primarily, obviously, this conversation is based in Dubai, at least on my side, but what role do you see the Irish diaspora playing, if they have an influential role in shaping Ireland's image, and how do you think they can contribute to that?
Well, look, the Irish abroad, largely in America, over the centuries, have been really significant in shifting the political dial. We wouldn't have the Good Friday Agreement if it wasn't for the Irish in America.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for John Hume to be able to convince significant political figures in America that it was important to them, largely because of their constituents, that we got a Good Friday Agreement, that we got peace, that we convinced the British to come to the table. None of that would have happened without the groundswell of support within the Irish community for change. And I think that's the same today. So this conversation can't be about, you know, what your second name is, what school you went to, where you were born, what your religion is. That's all gone. Not all gone, but that's insignificant. What it has to be about is, can we make this place better for young people? And for me, that takes us away from all the old arguments. And there's just the people who've left Ireland and gone and made lives for themselves. Most people in Dubai are doing very, very well. You know, they've done well, they've worked hard, and they're successful. I think that perspective is very important for political leaders here to hear. Mm-hmm. And so there's an onus on us, actually, to get out there, to talk to people, to listen to people, and to bring those experiences back. We need to force the conversation. We need to force the political establishment to get involved in this conversation. I'm trying to do that, but they need to hear it from you guys as well. But I think we need to be better at involving, particularly communities like the Middle East, where, you know, there hasn't been traditionally an Irish abroad kind of community, and the work that you're doing and the organization's doing is really, really significant and important. I think the first step to make them feel more involved is to give them presidential voting rights. I mean, that's something that's been promised and not delivered. I think that's a way of tying people back into the democratic life of the country, and that's something that we're campaigning on as well. But I just think I wouldn't underestimate the voice of the Irish abroad. It's very important, very significant, and always has been.
I think I mean, especially in my own personal opinions, is we would love to have a presidential vote to open up the door, at least for the Irish diaspora abroad. But I mean, with 40 million people recognizing as Irish, how would that voting system look? I mean, we're going through an American voting system and its complications. I wouldn't even question how 40 million Irish abroad would try and vote.
Well, where I live in London, or stay in London, it's around the corner from the American embassy, and I was going past on my electric bike, the Lime bikes they have in London where you can rent them, the other day, and past the embassy, and they were queued for I don't know how far to come and vote in the presidential election. I hope they were voting the right way, but I think there's ways of doing it. It's much easier to do it for the presidential election because the president has no real power. Like, he's not in government, and it's a symbolic role, a very important role, and has been over the years, particularly for the diaspora. But I think we can organize it. We can find a way. We can do mail-in ballots. There's lots of ways of doing it. The most important thing is to give that Irish community abroad a sense that they're part of it, that they're part of that there are, like, I don't have a vote, which is kind of mad, and I live in Derry. I don't have a vote. I didn't vote for Michael D. Higgins. I campaigned for him, but I couldn't vote for him. And it's weird, but he's my president. And I think that's the president has been a very important soft power sort of vehicle around the world for the Irish community, and I think we need to give people a vote on that. If we start with Derry, it'll be a good start, but Dubai should be quickly after it.
When you touched on this, before going to my last question, you touched on this there about introducing the conversation, whether it's around Irish unity or not, or at least Ireland's future, maybe taking place in the Middle East. How do you feel we go about that? I mean, the Irish diaspora here, I know, are thriving for conversation and more ministerial visits. I think this year, or at least 23 to 24, we've had more South of Ireland ministerial visits than ever.
Yeah.
But we do have a big contingency of people here from the north of Ireland, you know, and most of them are teachers or in the health industry, and even in financial and fintech. So there are some very influential young people from the north of Ireland, and we've yet to see any connection from the north of Ireland. I mean, we had Leo Varadkar here, we had Coveney here, we had Micheál Martin here, and we've yet to see anybody from Northern Ireland's political standpoint address the diaspora abroad. How do you think we can sort of bend that or change that?
Well, we need to fix that, and I'll think about that. So one of, like, again, we're building this organization, the Ireland Commission. I think one of the things I've asked the other party leaders in the South to do as well, I've been asking the Irish government to do this since 2016, to set up a new Ireland forum, re-establish it. That was one of the first things that happened to build towards the Good Friday Agreement in the 80s, and to bring all the political parties together with experts to discuss what this would look like. But there's no reason why there couldn't be conversations organized by the embassies, places like Dubai, to bring the community together. I know a lot of the people you're talking about here living in Dubai from the north, plenty of them from Derry. There's no reason why they couldn't be involved in conversations, and it's something I think as a commission, when we kind of resource up, we could be looking at coming out and trying to help organize some of those conversations. But people need to feel involved. This is a bigger and broader thing than we've ever done before. This is the biggest conversation that we've ever had about the future of the country. It's only getting going. But to ignore those people who've left, mostly hopefully temporarily, would be a big mistake. So whatever I can do to ensure that we don't ignore that and that we're involved in that, I'm happy to do, and I'll encourage others to do the same.
What do you think are the most significant challenges to achieving Irish unity, and how can they be addressed, particularly within the Irish abroad?
Well, first thing is a lack of knowledge as to what it's going to look like. So if we had a referendum today, we'd lose, because nobody knows what it's going to look like, and we haven't done the work. That's why I'm just getting on with doing the work on that. I'd like the Irish government to do more of that, but we'll see where that goes. The second is there's 1 million people in the north who have no allegiance to the south, have an allegiance to Britain, where I'm sitting in London right now, and we have to make them feel comfortable that actually what they're buying into is something that's positive, that's going to embrace them, it's going to embrace their Britishness. That we have to do things to make us uncomfortable, to make them more comfortable. We need to tell them that the connection with Britain will exist, and we won't be governed by London anymore, but we're not severing those ties. In fact, we can deepen them economically and politically, because the world is a small place now. Borders don't mean what they used to mean. Like, people who are listening to this obviously understand that, because they're living thousands of miles away. That we can build back into the European Union our opportunity to engage across the world in a way that Brexit tried to cut off. And so what we're selling is a positive thing. Nobody loses anything, but we can all gain. And that the blockage is, though, we haven't explained what it is. And that's why we're doing this work. But what we've been doing for 2 or 3 years has been having really quiet conversations with people from a unionist background. We've been the Shankill Road with the New Ireland Commission. It was tough, but we were there, and they all said at the end of it they'd like us to come back. So even in places you think it should be very difficult to have a conversation, people are interested. They're not bought in, but they're interested, and we have to kind of rush through that gap now and make them feel comfortable that there's something positive at the other end of it.
Well, brilliant. I think we've kind of ran through most of at least within this short time frame, so that we can get everybody engaged in this conversation. And I greatly appreciate it, Colum, especially if you're going to look further into everybody who's in this side of the world from the north of Ireland. I know, we have a lot of people from the north of Ireland, in Kuwait and Qatar, and Riyadh for Saudi's development for 2025 and beyond, and primarily here in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, Sharjah. There's a contingent, if you could look at that. They help these guys, both of a Republican or a nationalist or a unionist background, to be involved in that conversation, or at least feel included in whatever. That would be great.
Absolutely, we can do that.
Now, you're obviously, I want to say, retired. Who knows? You might come back in as SDLP leader in a few years. That's not a convincing face.
Not right now, no.
Oh, But look, you're very, very vocal. You've had many conversations with way better interviewers than myself, more party political leaders across the board, and we all know who, or at least for those who are interested, and we hope that this conversation helps for at least those who are interested in the political forum, what you do and what you've done. But outside of politics, what's some things that we don't know about Colum Eastwood, or what might you be working on outside of the New Ireland Commission and outside of your political realm? What do we know? What do we not know about Colum Eastwood?
Probably a lot. I'm actually going at this conversation to boxing, which I used to do martial arts for years when I was a kid, and I've kind of taken a lot of it back up again to try and get into some shape. But I just don't want to get hit in the face too much anymore. Those days are gone. But look, I have 2 kids, 2 girls, Rosa and Maya. They're 9 and 7. They take up a lot of. I have more free time now, but still not a lot. But they take up a lot of that. I'm obviously a Derry City fan, as you know, and own a pub as well. Actually, Guildhall Tap House in Derry, if anybody's ever over.
Great point.
Which is good, and so no, I don't run that. My ex-wife does, but I'm still involved in the background. But we, I'm just busy, and I like being busy. And I've spent for a few weeks there after I stood down from leadership. It was a bit odd, people like being at your own wake everywhere you went. People were, listening to people talking on the radio about your career. I'm 41 years old, so I think I have a lot more to do. I'm happy not being leader, but as I always try to tell our people in the party, you're all leaders in your own community, and you have to act like it. And there's a lot to do representing Derry, particularly in the British Parliament. But there's just a lot happening in the future of the country that I think we can get involved in. But I don't know if that answers your question, but there's is
there a book in there somewhere? Is there a Colum Eastwood book? Is there a biography like Roy Keane? He's already got 2 biographies. He still had one life, but he has 2 biographies.
I'm in the middle of trying to write, not a biography at all. I think I'm too young for that, but I'm in the middle of trying to write a book about this topic, about the future of the country, and trying to make it. There are a lot of kind of books out there that are very technical about this. I think we need to have the conversation needs to be simpler and more straightforward. and I'm in the middle of trying to write that now. I've written, I don't have the discipline of a writer as I maybe had years ago because I've just had such a hectic life, but I've written the same thing. I've written the same chapter about 4 times, but I am determined to get this thing done over the next few months and see where that goes. But I'm looking forward to that. And if I do, maybe do a book launch out in Dubai if I can get the thing written. But that should keep me busy enough. But it's funny you're running 100 miles an hour when you're a party leader, and then it's kind of what would normally be a very busy life doing what I'm doing now just seems like not busy at all because of what I was doing before. But I'll ratchet it up again because I'm not good at being idle, you know.
I know. Well, listen, Colum, on behalf of the Irish in Dubai and the Dubai Irish Society, I'd like to thank you for your time and the great insights you led us for either Irish unity or Ireland's future in general. And on behalf of the Irish diaspora, thank you very much.
Thank you, Billy, and thanks for everything you're doing. We're watching with pride from Derry. Thank you.